Diving into perhaps the most famous horror manga author's work for the first time, the legendary Junji Ito is definitely a name that I have heard brought up for some time now since I began to cover manga on this channel. After several dozens of recommendations, I went with Uzumaki for my first experience, a 19-long chapter story that delves into the odd, the macabre, and the unexpected, fusing psychological horror, suspense, and very well-placed uses of disturbing, grotesque imagery. Uzumaki feels like a mix between the atmosphere of The Twilight Zone and the explosive gore of Hellraiser, with some of the most unexpected scares and story beats that I've read in manga. Before I get into my review though, I do just want to very briefly shout out a Patreon supporter of mine, Adam, and plug his manga, which is called The Shonen Beat. I've actually reviewed this manga on my channel before. I have 2 videos of it actually, if you guys want to check it out. I really love it, and I love helping out and supporting other creators and artists, and I legitimately am a huge fan of this manga, and I've been keeping up with it as he's released new chapters. It's a shonen style series in the vein of sort of like Hunter x Hunter, but centered entirely around music and a world where freedom of expression and sound has been outlawed. The action is fought through the music itself, and a power system has been created that I think is super creative and unique, and unlike any of the other manga that's out there right now. There will be a link in the description below to his website where you can go read the first few chapters for free. Also the links to his Instagram where you can follow him, just check out his artwork and support him as he goes on and creates this manga. I think it's really good. I think you guys should definitely check it out. Show some support, follow him on Instagram, all that stuff. Links are below in the description. And also, while I have you here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel because I do release consistent manga, anime, movie, and just sort of real talk videos. I noticed about 60% of my watchers are not subscribed, so if you could subscribe, that would be really awesome. And it's been scientifically proven that if you subscribe to my channel, you have at least a 70% chance of having your town not be taken over by some weird spiral thing that will eventually kill you. This also means that you won't be driving a pair of scissors into the side of your face, but instead you'll be living in luxury, full of riches and beautiful women, or men, whichever way you swing, and of course you'll be subscribed to my channel, so everything's gonna work out really well for you. So, Uzumaki. This story revolves around a small town by the seashore and the bizarre happenings that are affecting the townspeople, and most notably, our main characters, Kiri and Shuichi. The entire vibe right from the get-go gives you this sort of cold emptiness in the atmosphere of the town, like everybody knows something is not right, but nobody wants to be the first one to say it. As if they all sense this darkness that is building from beneath their feet, and some people are more sensitive to the energy that's emitting than the other ones are. This is also why I say it reminds me of The Twilight Zone. That show would oftentimes take the mundane character and place them into a situation where everything and everyone around them seemed like they were in on something that the main character wasn't. In the case of Uzumaki, it is the curse of the spiral. And what does that actually mean? Well, I'm going to try to keep this as spoiler-free as I possibly can, with a few exceptions, as I mentioned a few scenes in particular that stood out to me. So if you want to go in knowing absolutely nothing at all, I would suggest saving this video for later, but I promise I won't spoil any of the big story beats or any of the big reveals. But what you will see in Chapter 1, and what every following chapter follows up on, is the strange obsession and appearances of the spiral shape showing up all over town. There are some people becoming addicted to the spirals, collecting spirals, or even being so terrified of spirals that they cut off their own fingertips or want to carve into their inner ear canal as to not have any spirals inside them. Everything in the town is spiraling, the clouds in the sky, the ocean nearby, and even human beings themselves. Some people literally transforming into other creatures, or twisting and contorting themselves, breaking all of the bones in their body in the process, becoming a slender twist of flesh. Spiritually, spirals often symbolize an idea of growth and rebirth, or a merging of the physical world and the world beyond our own. Something dying and then something being born again, even being attributed to the feminine due to the life-bringing aspect it has. And there is some interesting life being born in this manga, if I have to say so myself. So I feel like this idea of death and rebirth, and maybe even being rebirthed into a completely different being or creature, is all part of the connection with the spiral that Ito was trying to portray. I don't know, I haven't read any other reviews or any interviews on it. This is literally my first experience with Junji Ito ever, so bear with me if I'm completely off base here. but I was thinking perhaps it was similar to the monolith from 2001: A Space Odyssey, a pillar that would appear just before huge events in human evolution, a preview into a gateway to a higher consciousness. Perhaps the spiral symbol in Uzumaki manifests itself before a massive rebirth, and knowing that one is connected to it in some way, that you will perhaps forcibly be put through this cycle and become something else on the other end, and that's what drives these people mad, too attached to their current consciousness and being afraid of this inevitable transition that they don't understand. But besides all that, our main character is a girl named Kiri, and her best friend is a boy named Shuichi, but the story is mostly told from Kiri's perspective and in the first-person kind of way where she consistently talks to the audience about the strange circumstances she's experiencing in her town. Some happen to her directly, and some happen to people that she knows, or people that she has just observed. The thing the manga does a really great job with is steadily increasing the terror with each chapter. Don't get me wrong, every chapter is straight up weird, and has something horrific going on in it, but it still consistently builds on itself as it goes further. Every chapter matters, and at first it may seem a little disconnected, just Kiri recounting different strange events in town, but with only 19 chapters, it builds very quickly, and we eventually get to see the entire town unraveling before her eyes, and her desperate struggle to continue to survive both the curse of the spiral and those affected by the curse. Shuichi experiences a devastating loss within the first 2 chapters of the manga, and he spends most of the rest of the story being a broken down shell of his former self, traumatized by the curse, and yet still fighting to find an explanation to keep himself and Kiri alive. But the story itself is heavily focused on the horror and the mystery involved, so don't expect it to get too into detail with the characters. They are personable enough that you feel for them as human beings, but we don't get much more on them other than just the general idea of who they are. But that's okay. It works for the story. It's not about Kiri and Shuichi's development per se, it's about surviving in a town that seems to be slowly being taken over by this possibly ancient curse and being sucked into this vortex of the spiral. I think my favorite chapters were called The Snail, Jack in the Box, The Umbilical Cord, Escape, and Completion, the final chapter. I want to talk a little bit about them, and I will be telling some details about the chapters to do so, so again, if you want to avoid anything that could be a spoiler, now is probably the time to check out the video. But the chapter called The Snail essentially shows one of Kiri's classmates has consistently been showing up late for school, always later and later every day, and he is also getting this swollen mark on his back that eventually starts to mutate and evolve, and the kid straight up turns into a giant snail. The first of many, actually, and this fucked me up because to me, body horror is one of the things that freaks me out the most. The idea of having no control over what is happening to you and going through this painful transformation or mutilation while you slowly are losing your mind and semblance of who you are. Also, how at the end, the kid's bully also turns into a snail and they somehow manage to procreate. Dude, I don't know. But the snail shell also having the symbol of the spiral, which again relates to rebirth. And yes, turning a human into a giant snail is weird and scary, but it also fits the themes and ideas that this spiral curse is forcing things to evolve at an unnatural fast rate that does not care about the human ego inside. In the umbilical cord, a bunch of women wind up having babies at the same time after having consumed human flesh and blood the night prior. As a result, these babies are able to communicate with one another and plan to go back inside of the womb. Again, I think it circles around to the idea of spirals and coming back to the beginning, cycle and rebirth, that sort of thing. They desire to become one, and the mother continues to consume those around her to help nourish the baby. In some of the most creepiest imagery in the entire book, in my opinion, is the mother with the sewn up stomach walking out of the operating room in order to consume more blood for her and her baby. One thing too that was interesting is that the baby started to sprout out these little mushrooms that began growing like weeds everywhere. And mushrooms also have a meaning linked to spiritual rituals and the longevity of life. So it's sort of like the babies are actively prolonging their existence by returning to the source of their creation, a place of calm, of comfort, and sustainability, being back in the womb. If spirals are also representing feminine nurturing energy, then of course the babies would want to remain there. And if all in this town is returning to its source in some way, well, there you go. It makes perfect sense in a bizarre, fucked up kind of way. Jack in the Box also has some of the most effective horror imagery to me, with this kid named Mitsuri who had a crush on the main character that would jump out and surprise her. Well, he thinks his love for her will stop a car, and side note, it can't. But Kiri and Shuichi go to see if he is truly dead and buried, and the way that he pops up out of his grave and his intestines just fall on the ground, and then he just starts to bounce after them, gagging and spitting everywhere. It just really was some of the peak horrific imagery in the entire manga to me. I also love the final few chapters of the manga where the few remaining townspeople are trying desperately to find a way out, only to be constantly trapped within the labyrinth of the town itself. Kiri trying to hide the dark things happening to her younger brother, and Shuichi somehow not losing his sanity yet, pressing forward to find out the secrets of the town and the curse of the spiral. Honestly, I truly enjoyed this manga, and it's hard to have many gripes with a story that's so short. The only thing I can say is that the characters aren't developed much, but like I said earlier, that's not really the kind of story this is, so it doesn't matter a whole lot. This was, however, my first experience with Junji Ito. Unlike many of the manga authors I talk about, Ito has made many shorter stories rather than a few longer ones. But Uzumaki was recommended to me more than any of the others, and I can definitely understand why. I am curious to check out more of his work, so leave a comment below as to which one I should go to next, and thumbs up the comments of the one you like too, and then I'll go with the highest rated comment. I can certainly say that this is very much within my style, and not only am I a fan of manga, but I am a huge horror buff as well. And spooky season is right around the corner, so more stuff like this would be absolutely fantastic in the recommendations. I have already had my first pumpkin spice coffee so far, so as far as I'm concerned, it's fall now, and we all have to start carving pumpkins in a few weeks. Just, if you start carving a spiral shape in every pumpkin you get and become a little too obsessed with it, I might ask you to go home. So yeah, I suppose that's it, guys. If you are a fan of Uzumaki or a big Junji Ito fan, please post your experience with this manga down below. What did you love about it? Or if you didn't like it, why didn't you? Also, please like the video and subscribe, as it would really help me out a ton. Also, check the links in the description for the Patreon and merch store in case you want to support me on that extra level as well. And you'll also find all of my various social media links where you can follow me. Other than that, guys, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you all next time.